The room felt cold, like a tomb. The air was heavy with the relentless beeping of machines, each beep a reminder that time was slipping away, 1 second at a time. Inside, Lisa lay motionless, her body ravaged by terminal cancer. It wasn't the disease that shattered her spirit, though. It was the unbearable loneliness. Friends who once promised to be there had vanished, their calls growing fewer until they disappeared entirely. Even her family, the people who should have been her rock, had quietly distanced themselves. But through it all, one soul remained, a loyal companion who refused to leave her side. Ace, her German shepherd. His warm presence was her only comfort, sitting by her through every painful treatment and sleepless night. His eyes, filled with quiet devotion, spoke volumes, even when no words could. In that sterile hospital room, amidst the coldness and isolation, Ace was all she had. And for Lisa, that was enough. As the beeps of the machines echoed through the silence, the weight of abandonment hung heavy in the air, amplifying the emptiness that surrounded her. But Ace? He wasn't leaving. Not now, not ever. The room, once filled with the soft, rhythmic beeping of machines, suddenly erupted in a frenzy of sound. The monitors beeped urgently, louder and faster, as Lisa's body spiraled into a frightening decline. Every breath she took seemed harder than the last. Ace could feel it. He sprang into action, pacing the room in a frenzy, barking, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. His eyes were wide, filled with panic, but his loyalty kept him rooted to her side. The nurses rushed in, trying to stabilize her, but they couldn't stop the inevitable. With gentle hands, they forced Ace out of the room, trying to regain control of the situation. But even as they pushed him into the hallway, Ace stayed on alert, his ears strained and his body stiff, growling low in the darkness. He wasn't just protecting her from physical harm. He knew. He could sense the danger lurking in the air, a presence that wasn't bound by the walls of the hospital room. Inside, the medical staff exchanged solemn looks. There was no denying it anymore. Lisa was nearing the end. The silence that followed their grave expressions spoke volumes, and in that moment, the cold indifference of the hospital felt like the cruelest reminder of what was happening. But outside, Ace stood as her last defense. His loyalty was a barrier, even against the chilling reality unfolding inside. As Lisa regained consciousness, her eyes fluttering open, she barely whispered, her voice fragile. "Why didn't you leave me?" Her words, filled with pain, echoed in the stillness. After everything, after everyone left her, why hadn't he? It was a question that shattered the heart. And yet, in the quiet understanding of Ace's gaze, there was no answer needed. He stayed. He always stayed. The world around Lisa faded into a soft blur, and suddenly, she found herself standing in the middle of a vast, endless field. The air was warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers, and the sunlight bathed everything in a golden glow. Ace, her faithful companion, was running freely beside her, his fur gleaming in the sun, his tail wagging as he moved with a joyful abandon. It was a place of serenity, untouched by the harsh realities of the hospital room, untouched by pain. As she looked around, figures began to materialize in the distance. Faces she hadn't seen in years. Her mother, once so demanding, now standing in quiet grace. Old friends, their voices from the past now calling out to her, smiling with warmth and longing. It was as though they were waiting for her, beckoning her forward, their presence offering both comfort and sorrow. The peacefulness of it all felt almost too perfect, too good to be true. But then, in the stillness, a soft, ethereal voice whispered through the breeze, so faint yet unmistakable. "It's not your time yet." The words seemed to echo through the field, lingering in the air as Lisa felt something stir deep within her. A pull, a sense of urgency she couldn't explain. The figures from her past smiled kindly, but their faces were shrouded in an inexplicable sadness, as if they, too, were aware of something unspoken. Suddenly, the dream began to fade, slipping from her grasp as she gasped for breath. Her eyes shot open, her heart racing, the weight of the dream pressing heavily on her chest. Was it a warning? A message? The peace she had felt in the dream was now replaced with an unsettling feeling. Something was left unresolved, something she had yet to face. And there, standing watch at her side, was Ace. His eyes never left hers, as though he knew exactly what the dream meant, guarding her with a love so deep it transcended anything she could understand. The room had always been quiet, but now something felt off. It wasn't the machines, the beeping, or the dull hum of the hospital. No, it was something deeper. Presence. Unseen. Uninvited. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her chest tightened, and the familiar weight of isolation suddenly seemed heavier, as if the very walls were closing in on her. Beside her, Ace stirred, his ears twitching at the slightest sound. He stood still, staring toward the window, his body tense. A low growl rumbled from his chest. A sound so unnatural, so unlike him, that it sent a chill up Lisa's spine. His eyes locked onto something she couldn't see, something outside the window. Was there something out there? Something in the shadows? She glanced toward the door, as if hoping for a distraction. And then, the door opened. Nurse Emily entered, her smile barely touching her eyes. She checked the monitors, adjusting the settings with practiced ease, but Lisa could barely focus. She had to tell someone. Ace had been acting strange all day, and the weight in the room, the presence, it was becoming impossible to ignore. Emily, Lisa whispered, her voice shaky. I had a dream. It felt so real. There were people, faces I haven't seen in years. She paused, trying to make sense of the unsettling images. Emily glanced at her, her face softening. Dreams can get strange in times like this, she said gently, almost dismissively. It's probably just the medication messing with you, Lisa. But Lisa felt the truth of it deep down. This wasn't just a dream. It was a warning, something more than a mere hallucination. As Emily adjusted the foredrip and checked the machines, Ace's growls only grew more intense. His eyes stayed fixed, unwavering, as if he was seeing something or someone that was just beyond the reach of the human eye. Lisa tried to shake the feeling, but the tension in the air thickened, like a storm brewing on the horizon. She could feel it now. An invisible weight in the room, growing heavier with each passing moment. The presence, whatever it was, wasn't going away. It was here with them. The door creaked open, and Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Standing in the doorway was a face she hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. Eric, her estranged brother. The one who had walked away so many years ago, leaving a void that no one else could fill. His eyes, filled with uncertainty, met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tension between them was thick, hanging heavy in the air like an unspoken accusation. The years of silence, the fights, the abandonment, all of it rushed back in an instant. Lisa's chest tightened, the resentment flooding back as she lay there, vulnerable and fragile. Her mind screamed for answers, but her body could barely respond. Ace sensed it immediately. His body went rigid, a low growl vibrating in his throat as he stood protectively by Lisa's side. His gaze never left Eric. The room felt smaller, more suffocating as old wounds reopened, and the harsh silence between them felt louder than anything. Lisa, Eric began, his voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, shifting his weight uneasily, as if unsure of where to start. I'm sorry for everything. I should have been here. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face seeing you like this. I'm sorry for staying away. His words were raw, drenched in guilt and pain, a stark contrast to the years of anger Lisa had carried. Her emotions warred within her. Anger, sadness, regret. But there was something else. Something that felt strangely familiar, like the piece of her that she had shut away for so long. The part of her that wanted healing, even if it was too late. Ace stood there quietly, his eyes soft but ever watchful, sensing the shift in the room. He didn't move, but his steady presence seemed to ground Lisa. The warmth of his fur, the steadiness in his gaze. He was here, like he always had been. Through it all. Through the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness. Eric's voice broke through the silence once more, and Lisa finally found the strength to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Why now? Her words were heavy with years of hurt. Why didn't you come sooner? I needed you. A silence fell between them, suffocating and thick with unspoken words. But Eric didn't retreat. He didn't look away. Instead, he sat at the edge of her bed, his face etched with remorse. I wasn't ready to face what I couldn't fix, he admitted softly. I thought if I stayed away, I wouldn't have to deal with it. But I was wrong. I should have been here. I should have been with you. The rawness in his voice softened something inside Lisa. For the first time in so long, she felt something break free. Like a wall inside her was starting to crumble. She couldn't forgive everything. Not yet. But there was a shift, a fragile truce forming between them. Ace's growl softened, and he moved closer to Lisa, his head resting gently on her hand. He stayed by her side, a quiet reminder that no matter what had happened in the past, Lisa wasn't alone now. As the minutes passed, Lisa's heart began to open, just a little. The bitterness that had festered for so long started to ease. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. And maybe, just maybe, there was time to make peace before the end. The weight of the past was heavy, pressing down on Lisa like a suffocating blanket. She lay in the sterile hospital bed, eyes closed, but her mind couldn't stop racing through the memories that had haunted her for years. Her mother's harsh words, the arguments they never resolved, the cold distance between them long before her diagnosis. Eric, the brother she once loved, now a stranger to her after years of silence. The feeling of abandonment, the anger that had been buried so deep, was now bubbling to the surface, threatening to overwhelm her. Ace, always by her side, sat patiently, his presence grounding her in ways words could not. He never judged. He never questioned. He simply stayed, through every moment of pain, through every flashback to the past. His warmth was a comfort, a reminder that no matter how much she struggled, she wasn't completely alone. As she lay there, Lisa began to reflect on the dream that had come to her. Those faces from her past, calling to her, beckoning her toward something she wasn't ready to face. Her mother, old friends, figures she had pushed away, rejected, or simply lost touch with. They were all there, standing in that dream, waiting for her to confront what she had spent so many years avoiding. The soft whispers from the dream echoed in her mind, the voice urging her to let go. It's not your time yet. Was it a warning? Or was it a message? An invitation to heal before the end? Lisa closed her eyes tightly, the words of the dream lingering in the air like a challenge. And then, in the stillness, she whispered it, quietly, but with a rawness that shook her to her core. I forgive you. The words weren't just for Eric or her mother. They were for herself, too. She had carried the weight of that bitterness for so long, letting it poison her soul. But now, in this moment of vulnerability, Lisa realized that holding on to the pain only chained her to the past. Ace nuzzled her hand gently, his eyes filled with an understanding that only a dog could possess. He had been her anchor all this time, and now, in this fleeting moment of clarity, she could feel the release. Like the last thread of a rope snapping, freeing her. For the first time in years, Lisa felt lighter, as though she had let go of something far heavier than the disease ravaging her body. And as she lay there, with Ace by her side and the weight of forgiveness lifting from her shoulders, she felt the faintest flicker of peace. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a cure. But it was something more important, freedom. Freedom from the ghosts that had haunted her for so long. And the realization that, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to heal. That night, the air in the room grew heavier, thicker, charged with something unseen. The soft hum of the machines, the rhythmic beeping, the quiet moments, everything seemed different. Lisa could feel it. A coldness seeped into the room, biting at her skin, as the temperature dropped suddenly. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, creating a dance of darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. And there, standing in the doorway, was Ace. His body was tense, his fur bristling with unease. He didn't bark, didn't growl loudly, but his posture told everything. His eyes were fixed, laser-focused on the door, a deep, low growl vibrating in his chest. Lisa's heart raced. This wasn't just any normal night. This wasn't just a power outage or a draft. Ace sensed something she couldn't see, and the fear within her began to take root. With a shaky breath, Lisa turned to Eric, her brother, still by her side but now filled with worry as he watched Ace's every movement. "What is it?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "What's happening?" Eric could offer no answers. He was as unnerved as she was, but the uncertainty in his eyes did nothing to ease the growing dread. Lisa's thoughts spiraled. Is this it? Has the time come? In that moment, Lisa felt it. Something had been waiting. Something in the shadows, lurking, unseen. She had always known it was there. But now, it had come for her. For the first time, the weight of fear was more tangible than ever, and it pressed on her chest, suffocating. But then, something shifted. In the midst of the fear, Lisa realized what was happening. It wasn't about battling this unseen force. It wasn't about resisting what was inevitable. The truth washed over her like a wave. The only way forward, the only way to find peace, was to let go. Let go of the anger. Let go of the hurt. Let go of the fear that had clung to her for so long. She looked at Eric, her brother, the one she had resented for years, and in a soft, trembling voice, she spoke the words she had never thought she could say. "I forgive you," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of a lifetime of pain, but also the freedom of release. The presence in the room seemed to pause. The air, heavy with tension, began to lift. The coldness eased, the darkness fading just slightly. She had taken the first step toward peace, not just with Eric, but with herself. Ace, still guarding the door, softened. His growl subsided, and he returned to Lisa's side, resting his head gently on her lap. He knew. He always knew. The time was drawing near. But now, with forgiveness in her heart, and Ace at her side, Lisa was no longer afraid. Whatever came next, she was ready. The room had finally quieted. The oppressive energy that had once gripped it seemed to dissolve, fading into the stillness of the night. The chill in the air lifted, and the warmth of peace slowly spread through the room. Ace lay beside Lisa, his head resting gently against her side, the bond between them stronger than words could ever convey. The tension, the fear, the anger, all of it had melted away. In its place was something new, calm, understanding, and above all, peace. Eric, still at Lisa's side, gently took her hand, his fingers trembling as if afraid to break the fragile moment. His eyes, once filled with regret and sorrow, now reflected something softer, gratitude and love. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of all that had been left unsaid finally beginning to lift. The years of silence, the distance between them, it all seemed so small now, so insignificant in the face of what truly mattered. "Thank you for letting me back in," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lisa's eyes fluttered open for a moment, and she gave him a small smile. A smile that spoke of forgiveness, of a heart finally unburdened. She reached out, her fingers finding Ace's fur. The warmth of him, her protector, her constant, was all she needed in this moment. She whispered softly, "Thank you for staying with me." Ace nuzzled her hand gently, as if to say, "I always will." And as the clock on the wall ticked on, Lisa's breathing slowed, her body finally at rest. The struggle had ended. The fight had been fierce, but in the end, Lisa was no longer bound by pain or fear. She had found her peace, and with Ace by her side, she drifted into a deep, tranquil sleep, her heart at ease, ready to embrace whatever came next. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales. Your support keeps us going.